Well, good morning and welcome to St. Andrew's Church here at Ardtray. One of the readings for today is the story of the walk to a place called Emmaus, recorded in Luke's Gospel. Today we'll have the reading, some thoughts based on the reading, and a song by our very own Grace Davison. So put the kettle on and come and join us for a wee while. The reading, and it's quite a long reading, is from Luke chapter 24, beginning at verse 13. Now, the same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know the things that have happened here in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and the rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was going to be the one who would redeem Israel. And what is more, it's the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us they'd seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going further, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it's nearly evening, the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. This morning's gospel reading is set on Resurrection Day, and it's from Luke's Gospel. And when Luke tells the Easter story, he divides Easter Day into 3 parts: morning, late afternoon, and evening. And he tells a story from each part of the day. Obviously, the morning story is set at the empty tomb. The late night story is set in an upper room. But this morning's reading is about the happenings of the late afternoon, when 2 people are out for a walk going from Jerusalem to Emmaus, a journey of about 7 miles. Now, the walkers are 2 friends of Jesus, or 2 disciples, 2 followers. One of them is called Cleopas, and the other one isn't named. And as they walk and talk, they're joined by this stranger, who later we will discover is Jesus, but they don't know it at the time. And the stranger, Jesus, asks them what they're talking about. Our equivalent will be, well, any news, any biz, what's the crack? Anything interesting happen around here, kind of thing. In my lifetime, several big things have happened that everyone has talked about. I think of things like the death of Princess Diana, or the events of 9/11, or even, of course, the current events brought to us courtesy of COVID-19. In Jerusalem in these days, everyone was talking about this man, Jesus. And Cleopas, the follower, and his friend couldn't believe that the stranger had never heard of what had happened in Jerusalem. And what follows is really what you could call the gospel according to Cleopas. he starts to tell Jesus, the stranger, this story. And it's all about this amazing man called Jesus, who was from Nazareth. And Cleopas tells the stranger, we had such high hopes for him. We thought he might be the Messiah. We thought he might be the one who could rescue us from Roman occupation. 3 days, he says, since all these things have happened, and this morning something really strange happened. Our women friends went to the tomb and they discovered the body was gone. Here's the strange thing about this story. Cleopas knew all the details. He knew all the facts about Jesus, but he didn't know Jesus, even though Jesus in person was standing right next to him. Years ago, the singer Bono from U2 sang these words, how can you stand right next to the truth and not see it? These two followers of Jesus, friends of Jesus, were standing right next to him, talking to the risen Christ, the one who claimed to be the way and the truth and the life. And they didn't see or recognize or understand who he was. And then Jesus, the stranger, speaks to them and he says to them, how foolish you are, how slow of heart to believe all the prophets have spoken. I suppose he could have been much harder on them had he wanted to. Why on earth, you might ask, did they not get it? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I talked to you about not recognizing even familiar people whenever we see them in a different context. Maybe that was partly it. But also, the idea of a Messiah or a rescuer who died would have made absolutely no sense to them. I mean, people expected the Messiah to come and take the Romans by force. The Old Testament promised a Messiah who wouldn't die. Jesus, their Messiah, had been nailed to a cross. A dead Messiah didn't make any sense at all. He simply didn't fit the bill. Now, Jesus has work to do. So as he walks and talks, he takes them on a kind of a walking, talking Bible study thing. He starts with the Old Testament scriptures and explains all the references and how all these stories point to his coming. And as he does so, he explains that actually it was part of God's plan that the Messiah would be a suffering servant. God would help us and God would rescue us by actually not being remote from our suffering, but actually entering into our suffering himself. You see, the friends of Jesus had been really far too selective in how they read the stories. They missed the fact that the Messiah would have to suffer. God hadn't acted in a way that made sense to them or that they expected. And that's partly why their eyes weren't open. Someone once said they saw the glory, but not the suffering. They saw the crown, but not the cross. And yet the cross was at the heart of all that God was going to do for us. Now it's getting dark at this stage. It's time to eat. And the two disciples invite the stranger in for a meal. And as he breaks bread, which is quite a strange thing because he wasn't the host, and it was normally the job of the host to break bread and give thanks. But as Jesus breaks bread, their eyes are opened and they understand who he is. Maybe they saw the nail marks in his hands. I don't know. But just as they realize who they're with, Jesus disappears. And the two disciples talking realize that as they had walked with him, their hearts were burning within them. Our Methodist friends will probably know the story of the conversion of John Wesley, one of the most famous men, indeed one of the founders of Methodism. He was a minister at the time of his conversion to Christianity, which might strike you as strange. But one night he went reluctantly to a meet in Aldersgate Street, and he wrote that at 9:15, as he was listening to a talk, all of a sudden his heart was strangely warmed and he was changed forever. There's a couple of interesting things about this story. First of all, it shows us that you can know all about Jesus. You can know all the details. You can know all the Bible references and yet not know him. And secondly, the story shows us that the risen Christ is with us in the middle of the ordinariness of everyday living. When the weary travelers sat down to eat, Jesus did what people did in ordinary, everyday situations. He took bread and he blessed it, and he broke it, and he shared it, and all of a sudden they realized who they were with. The good news is that that same risen Jesus walks with us on our journeys too. He listens to us, he teaches us, and most importantly, he warms our hearts with his presence.
I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my sorrow shares? None but thee, dear Lord, none but thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. When my feeble life is time for me will be no more. Guide me gently, safely on to thy kingdom, dear Lord, to thy shore. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be.
Easter is not an event that has occurred. It's an adventure that has begun. Not a place we have visited, but rather a path on which we stand. A story not complete, but unfolding. Characters still breathing stations, still teeming with the promise of new life, not just for you and for me, but for all people in all places. A cosmic crux, a turning point of time. Easter is the season of wild hope, of dangerous intent and potent promise, where the future flaps unfurled in the Spirit's breeze, where hopes bubble with uncorked effervescence, where toes tap to free-form rhythms, where rainbow hues splash empty canvas. Today we continue the journey. We re-enter the story to explore our questions, to uncover our doubts, to face our nagging need. We walk the path of two who travel the dusty road, wrapped in confusion and despair. Two who shared the company of a stranger, voicing their pain, airing their fears, and in the listening heard words of hope and promise, and in the eating received the true bread of life. Today we re-enter the story with the expectation that Christ will also reveal himself to us in sights and sounds, in words and symbols. So, risen Christ, walk with us this day. Be our companion and guide. Be our teacher and friend. Be our host and servant, bringing your gifts of faith, peace, hope, and deep joy as always. Amen.